Southern is already doing something that they didn't do last year, naming QB1 before spring practice is over, and I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh, yeah. It's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, Sam Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU, your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you go to FanDuel and you are a new customer, you can get $200 back in bonus bets when you put down a $5 winning bet. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. We'll wrap up today's episode by looking at the Tennessee State fans who I believe should be studying the DC Defenders because it may show you what kind of team you'll have in 2025. In segment 2, this is great timing for the HBCU Women's Basketball All-Star Game. The first annual event will be Saturday, so make sure you're checking that out. And I just want to talk about the timing right now. But in segment 1, I already think Southern is off to a better start than they were last year. I'm going to explain to you why that's funny in two ways. But the first way is they won the SWAC West. They won a divisional title last year. But I think that they're off to a better start because they named their quarterback early. That's something that they did not do. And if you've been studying or you've been watching this show for a minute, you know how much I despise the QB hot potato. And the QB hot potato can be 2 players, it can be 3 players. But if you have more than one quarterback and you keep going back and forth, you keep putting your foot in, taking your foot out, right? If you keep doing those things at the quarterback position, Darrion's going to get upset. Like, I just can't stand it. I don't think that it's a winning formula. I understand that Southern did this and still won. I think they won in spite of it, but I do not think it is a winning formula. I would argue it is a formula for disaster, inconsistency, and it is counterproductive to the development of young quarterbacks. Now, if you got a guy who's a junior and a guy who's a senior, I guess you're not really worrying about development too much. That's not something that's really floating through your head. And if it's not floating through your head, if you're not worrying about development, I have a little bit less of a problem with it. But you look at a guy like Zay Teaser, who I believe was talented. He just needed to take his bumps. Sometimes you got to let players take their bumps, really, especially when they're young. Now, when you got a guy who is a 4th-year junior, a redshirt junior, or it's going to be a 5th-year senior, right? We can start talking about you might just not be it. You might just not be it. But that whole back and forth, Connell Maynard used to have it bad. Oh, my God. I hated when he did that so much. I hated when he did that because you don't allow people to get rhythm. You don't allow quarterbacks to get into the groove. You don't allow quarterbacks to play free. You force them to play tight because they know that, hey, man, I did just make a mistake in that first quarter. It's halfway through the third. I make another. Zay Teaser might be coming in the game. Bowden might be coming in the game. Right? Like these are things that you have to legitimately worry about. But it's funny to me that I see her say, oh, they're off to a better start. So what does that mean? Now they're going to win the SWAC title instead of the SWAC West? I don't know. Right? But I just wasn't a fan of it. And you end up having a 3-man rotation at quarterback with Zay Teaser, Noah Bowden, and then also Jalen Woods. Woods is going to be your starting quarterback in 2025. They've named that in starting in spring practice. Now, here is a tweet that I have retweeted on my X account, so reposted. But the quote is from Terrence Graves about Jalen Woods. He understands what we want and what we're requiring. Jalen Woods, this is the description. Jalen Woods is the Jags' clear QB1 for spring ball. A big difference from this time last year. Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing. It's not like it really worked for them. It's not. Like let me Google and see what stats that SWAC or excuse me that Southern had as far as passing goes. Because I don't think it was good. I do not think it was good. As far as passing offense goes, well, it was fourth. Guess it wasn't that bad. But I wasn't happy with it. I'll say that. I remember sitting there not liking how they played at quarterback, especially with Biden. I was just like, I wasn't a fan. 14. That's crazy. Didn't feel that way. It really did not feel as if they were that successful passing the ball. But I do remember when Biden came in the game against Jackson State and he was just airing them out deep. I do remember that. That was notable. But anyway, I wonder if that might have been yards. That might have been total yards. And they did play one more game than everybody else. I'm out here trying to find a reason. Nah, that's average. That's average. Sheesh. Anyway. But you know what? I'm not gonna go there. Point being, I didn't like Southern's passing attack. Sometimes the eyes lie and sometimes the numbers lie. I'm gonna say that the numbers lied here. I was unhappy with it. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that you're moving around. Like I said, I think that is a recipe for a disaster. I think that that is a losing strategy. I just do. But now that you have Woods, he is the last man standing. Teaser went to Grambling. Wish him the best. I do like Teaser. I think he's a talented young quarterback. But Biden, he entered the portal in December. No update on whether he removed his name. No update on whether or not he picked a new team. Last post he has is, these are my highlights 2 days after he said he entered the portal, but nothing updating on what he chose to do. So it looks like Woods will be the last man standing, but I don't think that he just got this job because he's the last man standing. Woods of the trio was the least utilized quarterback. He was the least utilized quarterback on that team because he only played 6 games. And I use 6 games very lightly. Like when you really think about it, he played 6 games, but one of those games he stepped in and had just a sack. He never threw the football. So that's why I don't even like looking at his yards per game. I don't think that it is an appropriate depiction of what he was as a passer. So instead, I'll use numbers that are isolated to when he was playing, when he was throwing, instead of per game. I don't think that's fair. But on the year, Jalen Woods had 66 attempts. Teasit had 71 completions. Biden had 94 completions. So you're looking at those guys as having more completions than Woods had attempts. I just used this to express how limited in usage he was. Matter of fact, let's get to that real quick because I think that's an important thing to note. So when I talk about how underutilized or how less he was used than the rest of his quarterback trio, that's to say that the amount of time he spent on the field is not the reason he's got the job. It's what he did when he was there. Maybe if Teaser was there and it's like, oh, well, we played him about 8-9 games, or sometimes you have a situation where a quarterback comes in where he was starting. He wasn't great, but he was the starter, so we're just going to name him the starter in the spring. That's not what's happening here. Jalen Woods played 5 games, really. 5 games. 2 games of which where he was the only quarterback who threw a pass. But this is not just, oh, well, you were here, so we're going to give it to you. I think that he impressed them. I think that you could have walked in and said we're going to have a competition, because playing only a handful of games is not enough to guarantee that you won't have a competition. It isn't at all. So, yeah, I think that this is a statement of how they view Jalen Woods. In his season totality, he had 38 completions on 66 attempts. A 57.58% completion percentage. That was the best of the triumvirate. He had 541 yards. He had the best yards per completion of that trio. He had 4 touchdowns and also 3 interceptions. So at just 6 games, 5 games, really, he had 4 touchdowns. Teasit led the team with 6. You know, his yards per game were probably higher than Teasit's were, but that one game where he stepped in, that counts against his yards per game. That's why I don't even feel the need to highlight that. Honestly, I don't think it's fair at all. But Woods is a player who started 2 games against UAPB. He was 31 or the score was 31-9. He was 14 of 22, 202 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Versus Grambling, he was 9 of 17 for 188 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So when you just look at his numbers, and he only has 17 throws on that 9 completions, when you look at his numbers, he's about 200 yards, going to give you a touchdown, maybe a pick. He's 1-1 in both of those games. These are only the games where he was the only quarterback who attempted a pass, which is what I assume when I hear QB1 will be the case moving forward. Yeah, I like that. You step into the spring with a clear leader, somebody that folks can follow, somebody that you can give the full install to. Everybody knows who's getting the number 1 reps. They always say iron sharpens iron, but sometimes you don't need to do that. You don't need to invite competition where competition isn't needed. He ain't Tom Brady, but I can guarantee you Bill Belichick wasn't thinking, we're going to bring in a quarterback so that Tom, he can have his iron sharpened. No. That was not how that went down, So sometimes you just have to understand when you need to give control over and not just force a competition, because competition brings the best out of people. People love that cliche. Everybody doesn't need to compete. Everybody does not need to compete. And I don't just mean everybody's not built for it. If I have Jalen Ramsey, Marshawn Lattimore was on my team, I can guarantee you wasn't competing for his job. Didn't need to. But yeah, so I like this move. Hopefully they stick with Jalen Woods. And it's fun. The second reason was funny. I didn't even tell you. The second reason funny is they actually started off terribly. I couldn't stand Southern as a team at the beginning of the season. I thought that they were less than entertaining. I thought that they were less than satisfactory. I saw that game against Savannah State, I think it was, and I was extremely disappointed. Was not a good team. So them having a quarterback that they started with, and I watched the game against Savannah State. When I seen it go from Biden to tease it, so I seen the impact of a quarterback change. Just rock with your guy. That's the way that I feel. Anyway, let's push forward because the women's basketball all-star game is coming up, and I think that this was perfect timing to have this event because popularity and everything around is really starting to match up. We're going to explore that a little bit deeper as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. And have you ever been waiting just, man, I'm tired, rubbing your eyes, stretching, trying to get up in the morning, but nothing seems to work? I've been there. And what I did is I took 5 Hour Energy because it allowed me to get through the day. And now that my day is flowing, now I have energy. Now I'm going good. I've also taken 5 Hour Energy when I was getting to the end of the day. And I was like, you know what? I need to get this extra work in. I need to record this podcast. I need to write these articles. Let me just get this shot of 5 Hour Energy, and it's going to push me through the day. Or maybe after a good hearty lunch, a nice size lunch or dinner, you just need 5 Hour Energy to avoid that itis. You can get it at wherever your convenience store is. You can get it at the local grocery store. Doesn't matter. All you have to do, or you can even go online, right? All you have to do is go to 5hourenergy.com and find one of the 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon and peach, mango. You can even build your 12 or 24 custom pack. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot from your local grocery store or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Basketball because it's the third. The Final Four is here. It's time. The Final Four is here. The dunk contest is here. Shout out Christian Ings. But anyway, the women's basketball game is also almost here. It's Saturday. That's obnoxiously in the way. It's Saturday, and I think that this is perfect timing. We're gonna do a preview with the men's and women's all-star game on Friday's episode, 6:30. Make sure you're tuned in. But right now, I just want to talk about how I think it's perfect timing because the popularity of women's basketball, especially on a collegiate level, is exponentially growing, and it's still growing, right? Like you just have different. I seen this conversation of who's the bigger star, Juju Watkins, hope you rest up, Juju Watkins or Jaden Daniels. I seen that conversation that was floating around social media. I don't even think that we're having this conversation 5, 6 years ago. Honestly, you talk about the growth of the women's game. There is no way that Juju Watkins versus Jaden Daniels' star power would even be discussed a few years ago. But the fact that it is a conversation and people on both sides are going back and forth making their points, I think it is a testament of where women's basketball, college women's basketball is at and where it is trying to be. It is trying to be this growing sport, or it is this growing sport, and it's trying to reach a point where we universally look at them as a premier athletic in college sports. And I think that is, if it's not there, it's right on the cusp of it. Right on the cusp of it. I'll tell you what could get it done. Paige Buckets. Yeah. Paige Buckets go ahead and win a championship and then coming on down to UTA and hooping for the Dallas Wings. That's what can do it. But no, on a serious note, you see the growth. And I remember when the whole Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark thing happened, everybody, like, man, it's just more interesting. I think there's a lot of aspects of women's basketball that is just different than men on the collegiate level. Staying for longer. You had a real rivalry that people could get behind. And I think that trickled down, excuse me, to the collegiate level or to the HBCU level. I think Joshua Sims Sr. came on the show and said, I find myself watching the women more often. And I can support that. I can support that because even going through the season, reflect on a year. Outside of Christian Ings' dunks, the best moments, the anticipated games, those came from women's basketball. Howard versus Norfolk State, I don't think that there is a game that was anticipated more that was not a tournament final. Legitimately. I know it wasn't for me. And I'm talking about all three of them. All three of them. And you can include that tournament final. There was no tournament final that I anticipated more than Norfolk State versus Howard. You got superstars. You got dominant teams. You look at Jackson State from a couple of years ago when they were able to go up and be a 14 seed. You look at Norfolk State from this year when they were able to go up and be a 13 seed. You see high success from women on the HBCU level. You just see it in a different aspect. I don't know when the last time a men's team was anything higher than a 15 seed. And even that seems like a rarity. You had two women's teams in the last 5 years who were able to be 13 or 14 or higher. That speaks volumes. That means something. That's something we should value. And I remember I had the founder of HBCU All-Stars here on the show last year. And I was like, well, when are we going to get the women involved? And he didn't give me no answer. He just said, it's coming. It's on the way. Okay. And now here we have it. Next year or the following year, which is now this year, we see a women's game. And I just think it adds up because the women have had great seasons for years. They've had great seasons for years. You had Amaya Simmons at Alabama A&M. You had Joyce Kennerson at Texas Southern. You had Nia Mitchell at Texas Southern, right? Like these are players who, at least the last two, I was able to watch myself. And then Simmons, I remember I talked so much about her and whether or not that she was going to stay at Alabama A&M with the coaching change. But this was a big time loss. You've had stars on the team. You've had 2 draft picks in Amisha Williams-Holiday, Angel Jackson. And that's just focusing on the SWAC. You've had mid-major stars like Diamond Johnson, Kiera Wheeler. You're looking at Destiny Howell, a great story of coming back from her injury. You see all these aspects of women's basketball on the HBCU level. You look at not Star Jacobs. She ended up leaving, but gosh, who was at UAPB? I'm mad because she's at Alabama now, and I want to call her Star Jacobs so bad, but I know it's not Star Jacobs because Star Jacobs didn't even play for UAPB. This is gonna kill me. I have to know, but I'm just trying to name stars, even those who left. I'm gonna be so mad when I see this because now it's on the tip of my tongue, and I can hear it in my head. What's her name? This is this year's roster. Y'all are gonna go on this journey with me, and y'all, Zay Green. They both went to Duncanville. Shout out Duncanville. Everybody know him for football, but they had Star Jacobs and they also had I thought Star went to Duncanville. Anyway, shout out to them. Point is, I'm laboring. The point is, the women's basketball game has been bubbling for years. I mentioned players who were well in the past, like a Joyce Kennerson. I named players who have served out their eligibility, like Nia Mitchell. You look at players like Amaya Simmons and Star Jacobs and Zay Green, who were here just last year, and they ended up transferring out. I'm naming the talent, and these are high-profile players who left. That's part of the gig, right? You got players who are here now, like a Diamond Johnson, like a Kiera Wheeler. You have those players, and we'll break down some of those stars who are there. So I'm going to stop now. But the women's game has been going up, 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 up. And this year was so special that it ends up being the perfect time to have an all-star game. It ends up being the perfect time to have an all-star game. So I love it. This is what we needed. Now, as we push forward, I think Tennessee State should watch the DC Defenders. I think there's a good idea of what that team will look like in 2025 just by watching the DC Defenders. I'll break that down and close out today's episode as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Put down a $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 back in bonus bets. I would suggest you find a huge spread for tonight's action, right? So, and then go back to the Final Four and do that. So let's see. If you wanted to feel risky, if you wanted to put some money down on the Final Four matchups, Florida versus Auburn, SEC versus SEC, Auburn's a 2.5-point favorite. Houston versus Duke. Houston is a 4.5-point favorite. Let's go, Parker. Let's go, Parker. That's my guy. But yeah, if you just want to go with the March Madness, if you just want to do the college basketball tournament, you have it there. So go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. Put some money on the March Madness if you want to, or the NBA games. That is an option as well. Does not matter. Sorry, I had something in my eye. But does not matter. Just put down a $5 bet you think is going to win. Then come back with your bonus bets and put something a little bit riskier. 2.5 points is slim. How you feeling? I'm taking the points. Anyway, but you'll never know unless you go to FanDuel.com. Remember, if you put down a $5 winning bet and you're new to FanDuel, you get $200 back in bonus bets.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Tennessee State, you should be watching the DC Defenders. First off, I forgot about this until I was talking about the UFL, and then I seen a couple of clips. I said, man, these guys get active. Shannon Harris is going to be on your coaching staff. I mean, it's very simple. I'm not going to make it complex. Obviously, these are guys without eligibility. So, no, you're not going to have those players on your roster. But I think you could look at how the attitude of the team is and expect some of that from Tennessee State in 2025. Reggie Barlow is not there, but you have his you have his offensive coordinator as the interim head coach and his defensive coordinator as the defensive coordinator. So you can get an idea of scheme. Do they like to bring a lot of pressure? We know that's what Greg Williams is most known for. Is that what he's doing right now? What kind of things is he going to try to implement? These are questions that I think you can answer by studying the DC Defenders. But what I found interesting is the fire of Shannon Harris and the fire of one of his players. After the game, Harris laid into the opposing head coach. I guess that coach said something that he didn't like, whenever it was, called him a doorman, and he let him know. That is a fire within your coach that spreads to the team. Does Reggie Barlow have that? I don't know. That's the other thing. Reggie Barlow not leading this team does keep you from saying this is exactly how they'll be. Because I think that teams take on the personality of good coaches. They don't take on the responsibility or the personality of all coaches, but they do take on the personality of good coaches. Shannon Harris yelling at an opposing coach, and it's a mentality that players see, and I think they rally behind. I think they like that guy. I think that there's a legitimate chance that Shannon Harris ends up being retained as the DC Defenders head coach, and he chooses not to follow Barlow to Tennessee State. I think that is a legitimate thing that could happen. But anyway, if Harris is there, I expect his offense to be rambunctious. I expect his offense to talk, because you had another player who said, look, I told him straight up, it's going to be a long day for you. He said that to the opposing offensive tackle. These guys are not shy for words. They aren't. And when it comes to that, I think that you should look at the mentality of the team being something that will follow Harris to Tennessee State. You should look at that as being something that doesn't just stop at Harris. I can tell you what, Greg Williams is that way. I can guarantee that Greg Williams is going to have his team a little bit feisty. I know some will say dirty, but I'm a Saints fan, so bounties didn't really exist. Y'all, I seen no proof. But neither here nor there. Everybody was doing it, bro. Everybody was doing it, except for the Saints. Everybody, all 31 teams, all the other 31 teams were doing it. But like, this is going to be a fired up bunch. A fired up bunch. These are going to be guys who are going to be intense. You might not get the whole, oh, let's check in and see what they said. You might not get that. Because the Big South OVC doesn't have the budget that the UFL has. But guarantee you, these guys are going to be chirping. These guys are going to be active. These guys are going to be aggressive. The leadership is going to be aggressive. They're not going to be scared to say anything. I can't wait. And because I can't wait, I'm going to watch the DC Defenders to see if this is just a one-time deal or this is how they are on a consistent basis. On tomorrow's episode, we'll be previewing the All-Star games and players to watch on the men's and women's side, as well as Alabama A&M is naming their new head coach for men's basketball. Let's make sure that we cover all of that on Friday's episode. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.